Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Chris here. So in today's video, I'm very excited to show you the Akai MPC Key 37. Let's dive into it. Alright, so hopefully you stuck around for that track. Basically, I'm going to break down what I've got here. This is my first experience with an MPC. Never really had one before or, utilized its way of making music. I find it's very different. Something like Ableton or Logic or whatever. I've had a really good time learning this keyboard. It's been a really interesting perspective on how to make music. Something that I'm not entirely used to the format of, but I was very excited to learn. You can actually see it's just saving. I've got it on autosave every like 5 minutes. So if this screen pops up, that's what it's doing. Also, side note, I've got a lasagna cooking at the minute, which I need to get back to in half an hour. So I'm going to try brush through this and hopefully keep it all nice and short and concise. So with that said, let's dive into it. I'm just going to put this down. I've got my stand here. Hopefully this will keep out of the way so I can actually show you this thing with my hands. Now, MPC. If you're not already familiar with it, it's basically like Logic or Ableton. It's almost a DAW, but it works in its own system. So this means I can create music without necessarily having to touch the computer, which is great. Saying that, it does partner with an MPC software that you can use. So if I make something in this, I can transfer it to the computer, continue it like any other beat. If I want to then take that to another software, I can bounce stems from it, which is really convenient. I can even export MIDI. I can do like an Ableton session and stuff like that from this. So super convenient, really neat. But the idea is that you're mainly working inside the machine itself. If you are familiar with the MPC, you've probably seen this half, just the top half, which is usually the pads, the screen, a couple of controls. That's about it. They do have another version of this, which is like a 61 key. It's been out for a minute. I did a video with Anderton some time ago. You can go check that out if you want to learn more. Andy Mack, who's a legend at using all of this stuff, he'll probably give you a way better explanation than I would. But I'm going to show you how I found myself making music with this. It's just come out, very new product, and I'm very excited to show it off. So, where do I start? In my eyes, when I was learning this, I took inspiration obviously from people like Jay Dilla, who were well known for sampling, using this machine to create all of the beats and stuff. So I kind of went down a similar route to create this track. So the first thing I did is I used the sampler. I've got my vinyl player. Probably can't see it, but you can hear it down there. And I've got this record. If I give it a quick blast, I basically played the record and I sped it up all the way, and then I recorded 20 seconds of that into this. This is the record. I'm going to play it and then speed it up. Hopefully I won't get copyrighted for that, but this is what we're working with. Side A. Have You Seen Her by the Chillites. Very cool, very cool. I picked up that vinyl solely for the sake of finding something to sample from it. I didn't realize it would end up being a dance track, but here we are. So the MPC includes everything you would expect to create music. If you go in your sounds, I'll go onto an actual track that I'm not using. So if you go into your sounds, you have, go pick a plugin. You have plugins that you can use. Now, bear in mind, you don't get all of these when you have the MPC. Some of these are additional, but you get a good collection of them. You get Bassline, Odyssey, Hype, Mellotron, Solina. There's a couple of things in there for sure. Electric, I believe. So you're pretty sorted. My personal favorite is the fact that you get access to, if I put it onto the drum pads mode, you get access to all of their kits. Bear in mind, all of these come stock with the MPC, which is great. I don't know how well you can see it on the top camera, but they're all sorted by genre, so it makes it really easy to find a style that might work. In this track in particular, I'm using a couple, so I'm using this one, which is UK House Kit Darlin', and if I unmute everything, just so we can hear it for the time being. Very housey. Get some extra sounds. And I'm only using a handful of these sounds, maybe just a kick or a snare or whatever it may be. In this case, the open hi-hat. The beauty of this thing, which I've really admired that they've incorporated this, it's got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which is great. But what that means is you can actually integrate your Splice into this. So one of the things I've done is I've made a kit. I've just gone into load here. You've got your Splice, and literally all of my samples from Splice, I can just go through and they all, oh, it's even telling me I've got a couple of new ones, but I'll leave that for now. And I can actually go through all of my legitimate Splice samples. They're all there, I can load them into sounds. So those are some nice samples that I've chosen for the sake of this track, which is awesome. Going through some other layers, it's mainly drums. Obviously I've got that sample, which I'll get into a bit later. There's the bass. If I want to add plugins, there's a whole mix section. Again, I'm going to try to keep this a bit concise just so we talk about this new thing. Because again, my first experience with this and I'm really enjoying it. So quickly, just to look into the sample, recording that and using it. So I've never sampled using this before. I did set up something in my studio. I've had just a loose auxiliary to like sample into the computer for my OP1 and pocket operators and stuff like that for ages. But with the OP1, I always wanted to sample into it from the computer. So I got another auxiliary, a really long one, just coming down here right now, but it's plugged into the back of this. And so what that means is I can route anything into the studio out. In this case, I've sent the vinyl player out to this, plugged it directly into the back with 2 jacks, and it's great. Just sample straight into the thing. And what that means is I've now got the sample. I can go into warp samples, I guess it will show me here. So you can see the whole sample. That's the sample. If I go into the next bank. So you can see I've got the whole sample there, which is great. In this case, I've warped it. So if I change the speed, everything should stay in line. That's awesome. I might have even pitched it slightly. But in this case, in the case of the song, I'm just going to again mute everything I've got here. I've got one track just playing the sample as I did. And then I've got this track, which is the kind of main chopped up track that you hear in the song. Sounds like this. Slap a kick on that. And that is the main vibe of the song. Now, talking about the plugins, you can go into the mix section, you can actually add some inserts. You have 4 inserts you can add to everything. So in the case of the sample, I've got this air pumper, and it's kind of like your LFO tool kickstart, you know, just doing that pumping sidechain type of effect. But as a performance tool, I wanted to be able to bring it in. So what did I do? I've just mapped it to one of these. You can hear when it's not really time synced because I'm not playing anything. Can come in whenever. But in this case, if I was playing the track with the kick and then I turned it off and on, really sick, and you really get that energetic house vibe from it. It allows me to then just play the normal round with the depth off, and I can turn it up if I want to. And you might have noticed I've also done a similar thing with the cutoff, so I can just pull down that cutoff. That just allows me to, you know, add almost a transition. Really sick. So super performance friendly, I guess you could say. What I really like about this, me coming from a piano player background, is the fact that it has keys. You know, most people using an MPC would be using just this top half until they kind of released it with this keyboard. I've actually set up mine. You can't really see it, but I've got here a loose MIDI cable. Bam. Got this loose MIDI cable. I could just plug that into the back of the MPC. I've got a patch set up on my MIDI keyboard here called MPC, which then allows me to just use a full length keyboard. I've got my sustain pedal plugged into that as well, which also means that I can have access to the sustain. I could also just plug it into the back of this, but you know, whatever floats your goat. But just having the keys, and they're quite nice keys at that, makes it really easy to just play in anything. I'm pretty sure I just played this bass line directly into the MPC itself. So I can actually just go into here, for example, there's another track with piano. And again, these patches are super lush. You've got a really nice collection of sounds. I'm just going to open a fresh track, pick a random instrument. Let's go. I actually quite like hype. There's a lot in there that you can use. And then we can go into sounds, check out all the presets that are labeled here. You've got basses, choirs, bells, everything, leads. It's quite packed. So say I go into, I do love a warm pad. Sick. Honestly, it sounds super lovely. I really have no complaints with the sounds of this. Some extra features that this has, which is also super convenient, things like note repeat, arpeggiator. So I can go in, maybe I can find bell. Nice bell. So you can hear that doing its arpeggiator thing, or I could do note repeat. So you got two variations of this. If I go into configure, it picks, you can latch notes, you can change the style of the arpeggiator, up, down, different variations, sustain latch, all that kind of stuff. Makes it really convenient. Note repeat, I find, is just a bit more quick. If I want to figure out something, I mainly find myself using the note repeat for things like drums. You can go into here. Really quick, really easy. Also, a new thing that I wasn't really used to working on this MPC was normally in Ableton, I'm used to this layout of like, you have a window to work in where all the tracks live and you can see when they all come in and when they stop. Whereas in the MPC, this is the length of my session. So I'm just going to turn the volume down and you can see that just playing all the way through, and it's literally just 4 bars, the whole song. And it just loops, that's all that happens. And the idea is that you create your pattern in those 4 or 8 bars or 16 bars, and then you can go into here and you can actually duplicate the length of it. So you can go and duplicate it a couple of times until it's 64 bars, 128 bars, however long it may be. And then you can go into this mute section and you do a run with the record on of just muting sections, turning them on and off, as I played in the beginning, basically. So you do a run of that, automating the mutes on everything, and then that is how you create your arrangement. I also have the option, I can go into my preferences, I can save as, and I can bounce out my audio mix down, stems, samples, Ableton live set. The options are there if I want to take it out of this and keep it relatively same sound. You can't really export the plugins and stuff because there are some internal plugins, but if you do have any processing on the sounds, that will print with the sound effects on there, and then you just copy it over to your DAW and you just continue working in audio as a flat bounce, basically. Otherwise, it's been a really great experience. I've really enjoyed working on this. I've made a couple of tracks, all different styles. I'll probably blast a couple at the end just so you can hear some examples of the different types of music you can make with this. But it's been a really great experience to learn. I have really loved working on this again. It's a pretty fresh keyboard, so it's well worth checking out some of the other videos on YouTube. Maybe some final things I'd like to touch up on would be, how do you edit MIDI, for example? You've got a nice little grid mode. There's also a step sequencer, which I haven't really dove into myself, but it exists. Obviously, you've got your mix section where I've got, these are all the programs, so all the different plugins, you could say. So that all lives in there. If I wanted to be a bit of a mix head about this, I could go into my main outputs and I could actually chuck plugins on the mix bus. In this case, there's a touch effects, which is kind of like a multi-effect. In this case, it's a cutoff. If I wanted to be a bit more mix head about it, I can go in, add a compressor. Akai have gotten access to all of the Air plugins, so you actually have some legitimate plugins outside of the Akai stuff, which is equally really good in there. Some things I really like is these vintage effects, which kind of replicate the old MPCs or the SP1200 sounds. If this one, I think the SP1200 ring is the most noticeable in terms of what it's doing to the sound. But I can go in and change it to like the MPC 3000 or the 60. Actually quite like the MPC 60. It's got a nice crunchy vibe to it, but in terms of, you know, options, there's none. It's just on or off, basically. Cool that it's there. I would usually stick something like a limiter or a maximizer on there just to get the full fatness out of the track. This is already quite a loud track, so it probably doesn't need it. But if I was going to do something, I could go into here, set that threshold so it's all the way up, and then let's see if it needs, oh, there we go, it's just auto-saving. I'll probably set this to be at -1 more or less, and then let's see if it needs any limiting. Definitely not. It's at 0 and it's already reducing 10 dBs. So I'm just going to leave it off. But it's great. You know, you have the options if you want to add anything cool. A nice little feature is that they've got some pretty interesting modulation plugins. Half speed is always a classic. Oof. Maybe not for the context of this track, but you get what I mean. It's there if you want to do some of that more trappy stuff. Last but not least, time correct quantizing. You've got that if it's usually always on. If you want to turn it off, there's a lot of things that revolve around this shift key that, you know, anything that's underneath highlighted just means you use the shift key if you want to access that. Yeah, you've got your undo, redo, a little bit of controls here. Your 16 levels, that is what you would use if you wanted to avoid using the keyboard and use the pads instead. Full level and half level, which is just your velocity. And yeah, I think that's about all the bits I want to touch up on. Again, lovely keyboard. I've really enjoyed working on this machine. The MPC has been something completely new for me, but I've really enjoyed learning it and trying to make different styles of music on it. And yeah, I can't really complain. It's been really good. I guess the only thing I can complain is I wish I had more space on my desk for it. But otherwise, yeah, it'll be fine on this table. You know, I make it work. That's probably about it for today, honestly. I'm going to try keep it short and concise. This video is probably already pushed a bit past as long as I wanted it to, but I'm just going to end off playing some other tracks I've made on this just so you get an idea of some of the things that's possible. Excuse any mixing, but it is what it is. These are all just demos, but it's more for the fun of seeing what you can create on it. If you enjoyed this video, let us know in the comment section below. I'd love to know what you thought about this keyboard or about working on the MPC. If you have one at home or if you have any experience using one yourself, I'd love to know, so let us know. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. And to anyone who's already done so, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Once again, I've been Chris Vella. I'll see you guys on the next one.